Hi everyone, let's have a look at chapter 31 of the Ickabog, Disappearance of a Butcher. That night, under cover of darkness, a party of horsemen dressed all in black rode out from Shoeville, headed by Major Roach. Hidden beneath a large bit of sacking on a wagon in their midst was the gigantic wooden foot, with its carved scales and long, sharp claws. At last they reached the outskirts of Barronstown. Now the riders, members of the Ickabog's Defence Brigade, whom Spittleworth had chosen for the job, slipped from their horses and covered the animals' hooves with sacking to muffle the noise and the shape of their prints. Then they lifted the giant foot off the wagon, remounted and carried it between them to the house where Tubby Tenderloin the butcher lived, with his wife, which was luckily a little distance from its neighbours. Several of the soldiers now tied up their horses, stole up to Tubby's back door and forced entry, while the rest pressed the giant foot into the mud around his back gate. 5 minutes after the soldiers arrived, they carried Tubby and his wife, who had no children, out of their house, bound and gagged, and threw them onto the wagon. I may as well tell you now that Tubby and his wife were about to be killed, their bodies buried in the woods in exactly the way Private Prod had been supposed to dispose of Daisy. Spittleworth only kept alive for those people for whom he had a use. Mr. Dovetail might need to repair the Ickabog foot if it got damaged, and Captain Goodfellow and his friends might need to be dragged out again some day to repeat their lies about the Ickabog. Spittleworth couldn't imagine ever needing a treasonous sausage maker, though, so he'd ordered his murder. As for poor Mrs. Tenderloin, Spittleworth barely considered her at all, but I'd like you to know that she was a very kind person who babysat her friends' children and sang in the local choir. Once the Tenderloins had been taken away, the remaining soldiers entered the house and smashed up the furniture as though a giant creature had wrecked it, while the rest of the men broke down the back fence and pressed the giant foot into the soft soil around Tubby's chicken coop, so that it appeared that the prowling monster had also attacked the birds. One of the soldiers even stripped off his socks and boots and made bare footprints in the soft earth, as though Tubby had rushed outside to protect his chickens. Finally, the same man cut off the head of one of the hens and made sure plenty of blood and feathers were spread around, before breaking down the side of the coop to allow the rest of the chickens to escape. After pressing the giant foot many more times onto the mud outside Tubby's house, so the monster appeared to have run away onto solid ground, the soldiers heaved Mr. Dovetail's creation back onto the wagon, beside the soon-to-be murdered butcher and his wife, remounted their horses, and disappeared into the night. Chapter 32. A Flaw in the Plan. When Mr. and Mrs. Tenderloin's neighbours woke up the next day and found chickens all over the road, they hurried to tell Tubby his birds had escaped. Imagine the neighbours' horror when they found the enormous footprints, the blood and the feathers, the broken-down back door, and no sign of either husband or wife. Before an hour had passed, a huge crowd had congregated around Tubby's empty house, all examining the monstrous footprints, the smashed-in door and the wrecked furniture. Panic set in, and within a few hours news of the Ickabog's raid on a Barronstown butcher's house was spreading north, south, east and west. Town criers rang their bells in the city squares within a couple of days only the marshlanders would be ignorant of the fact that the Ickabog had slunk south overnight and carried off 2 people. Spittleworth's Barronstown spy, who'd been mingling with the crowds all day to observe their reactions, sent word to his master that his plan had worked magnificently. However, in the early evening, just as the spy was thinking of heading off to the tavern for his celebratory sausage roll and a pint of beer, he noticed a group of men whispering together as they examined one of the Ickabog's giant footprints. The spy sidled over. "Terrifying, isn't it?" the spy asked them. "The size of its feet, the lengths of its claws." One of Tubby's neighbours straightened up, frowning. "It's hopping," he said. "Excuse me," said the spy. "It's hopping," repeated the neighbour. "Look, it's the same left foot over and over again. Either the Ickabog's hopping or—" The man didn't finish the sentence, but the look on his face alarmed the spy. Instead of heading for the tavern, he mounted his horse again and galloped off towards the palace. So one more chapter today. Chapter 33. King Fred is worried. Little knowing of the new threat to their scheme, Spittleworth and Flapoon had just sat down to one of their usual sumptuous late-night dinners with the king. Fred was most alarmed to hear of the Ickabog's attack on Barronstown, because it meant that the monster had strayed closer to the palace than ever before. "Ghastly business," said Flapoon, lifting an entire black pudding onto his plate. "Shocking, really," said Spittleworth, carving himself a slice of pheasant. "What I don't understand," fretted Fred, is how it slipped through the blockade. for of course the king had been told that a division of the Ickabog Defence Brigade was permanently camped around the edge of the mast to stop the Ickabog escaping to the rest of the country. Spittleworth, who'd been expecting Fred to raise this point, had his explanation ready. "I regret to say that 2 of the soldiers fell asleep on watch, your majesty. Taken unawares by the Ickabog, they were eaten whole." "Suffering saints," said Fred, horrified. "Having broken through the line," continued Spittleworth, "the monster headed south. We believe it was attracted to Barronstown because of the smell of meat. While there it gobbled up some chickens, as well as the butcher and his wife." "Dreadful, dreadful," said Fred with a shudder, pushing his plate away from him. "And then it slunk off back home to the marsh, did it?" "So our trackers tell us, sire," said Spittleworth. "But now that it's tasted a butcher full of Barronstown sausage, we must prepare for it trying to break through the soldiers' lines regularly. Which is why I think we should double the number of men stationed there, sire. Sadly, that will mean doubling the Ickabog tax." Luckily for them, Fred was watching Spittleworth, so he didn't see Flapoon smirk. "Yes, I suppose that makes sense." He got to his feet and began roaming restlessly around the dining room. The lamplight made his costume, which for today was of silk sky blue with aquamarine buttons, shine beautifully. As he paused to admire himself in the mirror, Fred's expression clouded. "Spittleworth," he said, "the people do still like me, don't they?" "How can your majesty say such a thing?" said Spittleworth with a gasp. "You're the most beloved king in the whole of Cornucopia's history." "It's just that, riding back from hunting yesterday, I couldn't help but think people didn't seem quite as happy as usual to see me," said King Fred. "There were hardly any cheers and only one flag." "Give me their names and addresses," said Flapoon, through a mouthful of black pudding as he groped in his pockets for a pencil. "I don't know their names and addresses, Flapoon," said Fred, who was now playing with a tassel on the curtains. "They were just people, passing by. But it upset me rather, and then, when I got back to the palace, I heard the day of petition has been cancelled." "Ah," said Spittleworth. "Yes, I was going to explain that, your majesty." "There's no need," said Fred. "Lady Islanda has already spoken to me about it." "What?" said Spittleworth, glaring at Flapoon. He'd given his friend strict instructions never to let Lady Islanda near the king, because he was worried what she might tell him. Flapoon scowled and shrugged. Really, Spittleworth couldn't expect him to be at the king's side every minute of the day. A man needed the bathroom occasionally, after all. "Lady Islanda told me that people are complaining that the Ickabog tax is too high. She says rumours are flying that there aren't even any troops stationed in the north." "Piffle and poppycock," said Flapoon, though in fact it was perfectly true that there were no troops stationed in the north, and also true that there never even been more complaints about the Ickabog tax, which is why he'd cancelled the day of petition. The last thing he wanted was for Fred to hear that he was losing popularity. He might take it into his foolish head to lower the taxes, or even worse, send people to investigate the imaginary camp up in the north. "There are times, obviously, when 2 regiments swap over," said Spittleworth, thinking he'd have to station some more soldiers near the marsh and house to stop the busybodies asking questions. "Possibly some foolish marshlanders saw a regiment riding away and imagined that there was nobody left up there. Why don't we triple the Ickabog tax, sire?" asked Spittleworth, thinking again that this would serve the complainers right. "After all, the monster did break through the lines just last night. Then there can never again be any danger of a scarcity of men at the edge of the marshlands, and everyone will be happy." "Yes," said Fred uneasily. "Yes, that does make sense. I mean, if the monster can kill 4 people and some chickens in a single night." At this moment, Cankaby the footman entered the dining room. With a low bow, whispered to Spittleworth that a Barronstown spy had just arrived with urgent news from the sausage-making city. "Your Majesty," said Spittleworth smoothly, "I must leave you. Nothing to worry about. A minor issue with my horse." Oh, I wonder if Spittleworth's going to be found out. Interesting. Right, have a go at the quiz on Purple Mash, and I will see you tomorrow for the next chapters.